Welcome back to Footnotes Folly, and to Josephus' Antiquities. I am Pemberton. This is Book 9, Part 2, and it is a bloodbath, the long prophesied fall of the house of Ahab, carried out by one terrifying man. Jehu, a commander, is anointed king by one of Elisha's prophets and drives for Jezreel like a madman. We will follow the whole purge, the killing of the two kings Joram and Ahaziah, the death of the old queen Jezebel thrown from her own window, and the systematic extermination of Ahab's 70 sons and the priests of Baal. Meanwhile in Judah, Ahab's daughter Athaliah, seeing her son dead, slaughters the royal family and seizes the throne, but one baby, Joash, is hidden in the temple for 6 years and then crowned by the brave priest Jehoiada, while the usurping queen is cut down. And the prophet's old warning about Hazael of Syria begins to come terribly true. Let us take up the story.
After Ben-Hadad died, Joram, the king of Israel, hoped he could take Ramoth, a city of Gilead, from the Syrians. He marched against it with a large army. While he was besieging the city, one of the Syrians shot him with an arrow, but the wound was not fatal. Joram went back to Jezreel to recover, leaving the whole army at Ramoth under the command of Jehu, the son of Nimshi. Jehu had already taken the city by force. Joram intended, once he was healed, to go back to war against the Syrians. But Elisha the prophet sent one of his disciples to Ramoth with holy oil, telling him to anoint Jehu and say that God had chosen him to be king. Elisha also gave the young man other words to deliver, and told him to leave as if he were fleeing, so that when he went away no one would understand what had happened. When the disciple reached the city, he found Jehu sitting among the captains of the army, just as Elisha had said he would. He went up to Jehu and said that he needed to speak with him about certain matters. Jehu rose and followed him into a private inner room. There the young man took the oil, poured it on Jehu's head, and said that God appointed him king so that he might destroy the house of Ahab and avenge the blood of the prophets whom Jezebel had unjustly killed. In this way, Ahab's house would be completely wiped out, just as the houses of Jeroboam the son of Nebat and of Baasha had perished for their wickedness, and no descendant of Ahab's family would remain. After saying this, the young man hurried out of the room and tried not to be seen by anyone in the army. You have guessed correctly. The words he spoke were the words of a madman. Jehu then came out and returned to the place where he had been sitting with the captains. They asked him why the young man had come to him and added that the man was mad. Jehu first answered as he did, but when they pressed him eagerly and asked him to tell them the truth, he said that God had declared he had chosen him to be king over the people. As soon as he said this, each of the captains took off his garment and spread it under Jehu. They blew trumpets and announced that Jehu was king. Jehu gathered the army and prepared to set out at once against Joram in the city of Jezreel, where, as already said, Joram was recovering from the wound he had received during the siege of Ramoth. At that same time Ahaziah, king of Jerusalem, had come to Joram. Ahaziah was Joram's sister's son, as has been said before, and he had come because of their family connection to see how Joram was doing after his wound. Since Jehu wanted to strike Joram, and those with him suddenly, he asked that none of the soldiers be allowed to slip away and tell Joram what had happened. He said that guarding the news would be clear proof of their loyalty to him, and would show that they truly wished to make him king. The soldiers approved of what Jehu had done and guarded the roads, so that no one could secretly carry the news to those in Jezreel. Jehu chose his best horsemen, mounted his chariot, and went toward Jezreel. When he came near, the watchman whom Joram had stationed there to look out for people approaching the city saw Jehu advancing and told Joram that he saw a company of horsemen coming. Joram immediately ordered one of his horsemen to ride out, meet them, and find out who was coming. When the horseman reached Jehu, he asked about the condition of the army, because the king wanted to know. Jehu told him not to concern himself with such matters, but to follow him. When the watchman saw this, he told Joram that the horseman had joined the company and was coming along with them. The king sent a second messenger, and Jehu ordered him to do the same as the first. As soon as the watchman reported this also to Joram, Joram finally mounted his own chariot, and Ahaziah, the king of Jerusalem, went with him. Ahaziah was there, as already said, to visit Joram after his wound because he was his relative. They went out to meet Jehu, who was advancing slowly and in good order. When Joram met him in the field of Naboth, he asked whether everything was well in the camp. Jehu sharply rebuked him and even dared to call his mother a witch and a harlot. We are being attacked by deceit and treachery. Joram, afraid of what Jehu intended and suspecting that he meant harm, turned his chariot around as quickly as he could and spoke to Ahaziah. But Jehu drew his bow and struck Joram, and the arrow went through his heart. Joram at once fell down on his knee and died. Jehu ordered Bidkar, the captain of the third part of his army, to throw Joram's dead body into the field of Naboth. He reminded Bidkar of the prophecy Elijah had spoken to Ahab, Joram's father, after Ahab killed Naboth, that Ahab and his family would perish in that place. Jehu said that when they had been sitting behind Ahab's chariot, they had heard the prophet say this, and now it had happened according to his prophecy. When Joram fell, Ahaziah feared for his own life and turned his chariot onto another road, thinking Jehu would not notice him. But Jehu pursued him, overtook him at a certain slope, drew his bow, and wounded him. Hazael left his chariot, mounted his horse, and fled from Jehu to Megiddo. Though he was treated for the wound, he died from it soon afterward. His body was carried to Jerusalem and buried there. He had reigned 1 year, and he had proved to be a wicked man, worse than his father. When Jehu came to Jezreel, Jezebel adorned herself, stood on a tower, and said that he was a fine servant who had killed his master. Jehu looked up at her, asked who she was, and ordered her to come down to him. At last he commanded the eunuchs to throw her down from the tower. When she was thrown down, her blood splashed against the wall, and the horses trampled her. In this way she died. After this, Jehu entered the palace with his friends and refreshed himself after the journey, both with other provisions and by eating a meal. He also ordered his servants to pick up Jezebel and bury her, because she was of noble blood and descended from kings. But those appointed to bury her found nothing left except the outer parts of her body, for dogs had eaten all the rest. When Jehu heard this, he marveled at Elijah's prophecy, because Elijah had foretold that she would perish in this way at Jezreel. Ahab had 70 sons being brought up in Samaria. Jehu sent 2 letters, one to those who were raising the children and another to the rulers of Samaria. In the letters he told them to set up the bravest of Ahab's sons as king, since they had many chariots, horses, weapons, a great army, and fortified cities, and by doing so they could avenge Ahab's murder. He wrote this to test the intentions of the people of Samaria. When the rulers and the guardians of the children read the letter, they were afraid. Since Jehu had already overcome 2 very great kings, they judged that they were in no position to resist him. They sent back an answer saying that they recognized him as their lord and would do whatever he commanded. Jehu then wrote back ordering them to obey his command, cut off the heads of Ahab's sons, and send them to him. The rulers called for those who had raised Ahab's sons and commanded them to kill the sons, cut off their heads, and send them to Jehu. They did exactly as they were ordered, leaving nothing undone. They placed the heads in wicker baskets and sent them to Jezreel. When Jehu was at supper with his friends and was told that the heads of Ahab's sons had arrived, he ordered them to be arranged in 2 heaps, one before each gate. In the morning he went out to look at them. When he saw them, he began telling the people present that he himself had marched against his master Joram and killed him, but he had not killed all these men. He asked them to notice that everything concerning Ahab's family had happened according to God's prophecy, and that Ahab's house had perished just as Elijah had foretold. After this, Jehu destroyed all of Ahab's relatives who were found in Jezreel and went on toward Samaria. On the road he met the relatives of Ahaziah king of Jerusalem and asked them where they were going. They replied that they had come to greet Joram and their own king Ahaziah, not knowing that Jehu had killed them both. Jehu ordered them seized and killed. They numbered 42 persons. After this Jehu met a good and righteous man named Jehoiada, who had been his friend in earlier days. Jehoiada greeted Jehu and began to praise him because he had done everything according to God's will in wiping out the house of Ahab. Jehu asked him to come up into his chariot and enter Samaria with him. He told Jehoiada that he would spare no wicked man, but would punish the false prophets, the false priests, and those who deceived the people and persuaded them to abandon the worship of God Almighty and worship foreign gods instead. He said that for a good and righteous man, the sight of the wicked being punished was excellent and pleasing. Persuaded by these words, Jehoiada came up into Jehu's chariot and went with him to Samaria. There Jehu searched for all of Ahab's relatives and killed them. Since he wanted none of the false prophets or priests of Ahab's god to escape punishment, he trapped them by deceit. He gathered all the people together and said that he would worship twice as many gods as Ahab had worshipped. He asked that Ahab's priests, prophets, and servants be present, because he intended to offer costly and great sacrifices to Ahab's god. If any of the priests were absent, they would be punished with death. Ahab's god was called Baal. After Jehu appointed a day for offering those sacrifices, he sent messengers throughout all the country of the Israelites so they would bring the priests of Baal to him. Jehu commanded that vestments be given to all the priests. When they had received them, he went into the house of Baal with his friend Jehoiada and ordered a search to be made to see whether any foreigner or stranger was among them, because he wanted no one of another religion mixed into their sacred rites. When they said that no stranger was there, and as they were beginning their sacrifices, Jehu stationed 80 men outside. These were soldiers he knew to be most faithful to him. He ordered them to kill the prophets and now vindicate the laws of their country, which had long been held in contempt. He also threatened that if any one of the prophets escaped, the soldiers' own lives would answer for it. So they killed them all with the sword and burned the house of Baal, and in this way Jehu cleansed Samaria of foreign customs and idolatrous worship. Baal was the god of the Tyrians. Ahab, to please his father-in-law Ethbaal, who was king of Tyre and Sidon, had built Baal a temple in Samaria, appointed prophets for him, and worshipped him with every form of worship. Yet after this god was destroyed, Jehu still allowed the Israelites to worship the golden heifers. Even so, because Jehu had acted as he did, and had taken care to punish the wicked, God foretold through his prophet that Jehu's sons would reign over Israel for 4 generations. This was Jehu's condition at that time. When Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab, learned that her brother Joram, her son Ahaziah, and the royal family were dead, she tried to leave no one from the house of David alive. Her purpose was to wipe out the whole family so that no king from that line could ever rise again. She believed she had succeeded. Yet one of Ahaziah's sons was saved, and escaped death in this way. Hazael had a half-sister on his father's side named Jehu, who was married to Jehoiada the high priest. She entered the king's palace and found Jehu, for that was the child's name, among those who had been killed. He was not more than a year old, and was hidden with his nurse. Jehu took him with her into a secret bedroom and shut him up there. Then she and her husband Jehoiada raised him privately in the temple for 6 years. During that time Athaliah reigned over Jerusalem and the 2 tribes. In the 7th year Jehoiada revealed the matter to 5 captains of hundreds. He persuaded them to help him in the attempt he was making against Athaliah and to join him in securing the kingdom for the child. He also received from them the kind of oaths that were needed to protect people who assist one another from the fear of being betrayed. After this he had good hope that they would depose Athaliah. The men whom Jehoiada the priest had taken as partners went through the whole country and gathered the priests, the Levites, and the heads of the tribes. They brought them to Jerusalem to the high priest. Jehoiada required them to swear an oath that they would keep secret whatever he disclosed to them, since the matter required both their silence and their help. When they had sworn the oath, and had made it safe for him to speak, he brought out the child whom he had raised, a child of the family of David. This is your king, from the house which you know God foretold would reign over you for all time to come. Therefore I urge you to arrange yourselves in this way. Let 1/3 of you guard him in the temple, let a 4th part keep watch at all the gates of the temple, and let the next part keep guard at the gate that opens and leads to the king's palace. Let the rest of the multitude remain unarmed in the temple. Let no armed person enter the temple, except the priest. Let part of the priests and Levites stay around the king himself and guard him with drawn swords. Kill at once any man, whoever he is, who is bold enough to enter the temple armed. Be afraid of no one, but continue guarding the king. These men obeyed the high priest's advice, and showed the firmness of their resolve by what they did. Jehoiada opened the armory that David had made in the temple. From it he distributed to the captains of hundreds, and also to the priests and Levites, all the spears, quivers, and every kind of weapon it contained. He placed them armed in a circle around the temple, close enough to touch one another's hands, and in this way kept out those who had no right to enter. Then they brought the child into the midst of them, placed the royal crown on him, and Jehoiada anointed him with oil and made him king. The multitude rejoiced, made a great noise, and cried out, "God save the king!" When Athaliah unexpectedly heard the uproar and the shouts of praise, she was deeply troubled. She suddenly came out of the royal palace with her own army. When she came to the temple, the priests admitted her, but those who stood around the temple, as the high priest had ordered, prevented the armed men who followed her from entering. When Athaliah saw the child standing on a pillar with the royal crown on his head, she tore her clothes, cried out loudly, and commanded her guards to kill the one who had set snares for her and tried to take the government from her. But Jehoiada called for the captains of hundreds, and ordered them to take Athaliah to the valley of Cedron and kill her there, because he did not want the temple defiled by the punishment of this wicked woman. He also ordered that if anyone came near to help her, that person should be killed as well. So those appointed to kill her seized her, led her to the gate of the king's mules, and killed her there. After the matter of Athaliah had been settled by this plan and in this manner, Jehoiada gathered the people and the armed men into the temple. He made them swear that they would obey the king and care for his safety and the security of his government. Afterward he required the king to give his own sworn assurance that he would worship God and would not violate the laws of Moses. Then they ran to the house of Baal, which Athaliah and her husband Joram had built to dishonor the God of their fathers and to honor Ahab. They tore it down and killed Mattan, who held the priesthood there. Jehoiada entrusted the care and protection of the temple to the priests and Levites, according to the arrangement made by King David. He commanded them to bring the regular burnt offerings twice each day, and to offer incense according to the law. He also appointed some of the Levites, together with the porters, to guard the temple, so that no one who was defiled might enter it. When Jehoiada had put these things in order, he, together with the captains of hundreds, the rulers, and all the people, brought Jehoash out of the temple into the king's palace. When he had seated him on the king's throne, the people shouted for joy. They then turned to feasting and kept a festival for many days. The city, however, was quiet after the death of Athaliah. Jehoash was 7 years old when he received the kingdom. His mother's name was Zibiah from the city Sheba. As long as Jehoiada lived, Jehoash was careful to see that the laws were kept, and he was very zealous in the worship of God. When he came of age, he married 2 wives, who were given to him by the high priest, and by them he had both sons and daughters. This is enough to relate concerning King Jehoash, how he escaped the treachery of Athaliah, and how he received the kingdom. Hazael, king of Syria, went to war against the Israelites and their king Jehu. He plundered the eastern part of the country beyond Jordan, the land belonging to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manassites. He also overran Gilead and Bashan, burning, looting, and doing violence wherever he could reach. Jehu did not stop him. He did not hurry to defend the country while it was suffering in this way. Instead, Jehu had come to despise religion, holiness, and the laws. After reigning over the Israelites for 27 years, he died. He was buried in Samaria, and his son Jehoahaz succeeded him in the government. Jehoash, king of Jerusalem, wanted to repair the temple of God. He called Jehoiada and ordered him to send the Levites and priests throughout the whole country to collect half a shekel of silver from every person for rebuilding and repairing the temple. The temple had been allowed to fall into ruin by Joram and by Athaliah and her sons. But the high priest did not carry this out, because he thought no one would willingly pay the money. In the 23rd year of Jehosh's reign, the king sent for him and the Levites and complained that they had not obeyed his command. He again ordered them to take care of rebuilding the temple. Then Jehoiada devised a way to collect the money, and the people approved of it. He made a wooden chest, sealed it tightly on every side, and left one opening in it. He placed it in the temple beside the altar and asked everyone to put through the opening whatever they wished to give for the repair of the temple. The plan pleased the people. They competed with one another in giving, and together they brought in large amounts of silver and gold. The scribe and the priest who had charge of the treasuries would empty the chest and count the money in the king's presence. Then they would put the chest back in its place. They did this every day. When it became clear that the people had given as much as was needed, the high priest Jehoiada and King Joash sent men to hire masons and carpenters, and to buy large beams of the finest timber. After they had repaired the temple, they used the remaining gold and silver, which was a considerable amount, to make bowls, basins, cups, and other vessels. They also continued to enrich the altar every day with costly sacrifices. These matters were properly cared for as long as Jehoiada lived. But when Jehoiada died, King Joash abandoned his care for God. Jehoiada had lived 130 years. He had been a righteous man and in every respect an excellent one, and he was buried in the king's sepulchres at Jerusalem, because he had restored the kingdom to the family of David. After his death, the leading men of the people were corrupted along with the king. They failed in their duty and violated what their constitution had established as best for them. God was displeased by the change in the king and the people, and he sent prophets to testify against their conduct and to lead them away from their wickedness. But they had become so attached to evil and were driven toward it so strongly that nothing could bring them to repentance. The examples of those who had insulted the laws and had been severely punished, together with their whole families, did not move them, nor did the fear of what the prophets now foretold turn them back from their transgressions to their former duty. The king even commanded that Zechariah, the son of the high priest Jehoiada, be stoned to death in the temple. He forgot all the kindness he had received from Zechariah's father. When God appointed Zechariah to prophecy, Zechariah stood among the people and advised both them and the king to act righteously. He also foretold that if they would not listen to his warnings, they would suffer a severe punishment. As Zechariah was about to die, he called on God to witness what he was suffering because he had given them good counsel, and how he was being destroyed in a most harsh and violent way despite all the good his father had done for Joash. The king did not wait long before he suffered punishment for his offense. Hazael, king of Syria, invaded his country. After he had overthrown Gath and plundered it, he set out against Jerusalem. Joash became afraid. He emptied all the treasures of God and of the earlier kings, took down the gifts that had been dedicated in the temple, and sent them to the king of Syria. By giving him so much, Joash avoided a siege and kept his kingdom from being put in extreme danger. The size of the payment persuaded Hazael not to bring his army against Jerusalem. Yet Joash then fell into a serious illness, and his friends attacked him in order to avenge the death of Zechariah, the son of Jehoiada. They laid traps for the king and killed him. He was buried in Jerusalem, but not in the royal sepulchres of his forefathers, because of his impiety. He had lived 47 years, and his son Ahaziah succeeded him in the kingdom. In the 21st year of the reign of Jehoash, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, took over the government of the Israelites in Samaria, and he held it for 17 years. He did not properly imitate his father, but practiced the same wickedness as those who first treated God with contempt. The king of Syria brought him low. In a campaign against him, he reduced his forces so severely that, from what had once been a great army, only 10,000 armed men and 50 horsemen remained. He also took many of his great cities from him and destroyed his army. These were the things the people of Israel suffered, just as Elisha had prophesied when he foretold that Hazael would kill his master and reign over the Syrians and Damascenes. When Jehoahaz was trapped in these unavoidable miseries, he turned to prayer and supplication to God. He begged God to deliver him from the hands of Hazael, and not to overlook him or give him up into Hazael's power. God accepted his repentance in place of virtue. Because God preferred to warn those who might repent rather than decide that they should be completely destroyed, he granted Jehoahaz deliverance from war and danger. So the country obtained peace, returned to its former condition, and flourished as it had before. After the death of Jehoahaz, his son Joash took the kingdom in the 37th year of Joash, the king of the tribe of Judah. This Joash became king of Israel in Samaria. He had the same name as the king of Jerusalem, and he kept the kingdom for 16 years. He was a good man, and in his character he was not at all like his father. At this time Elisha, the prophet, was already very old and had fallen ill. The king of Israel came to visit him. When he found Elisha very near death, he began to weep in front of him and mourn. He called him his father and his weapons, because through Elisha's help he had not needed to use his weapons against his enemies. Instead, he had overcome his adversaries by Elisha's prophecies without fighting. Now Elisha was leaving this life and abandoning him to the Syrians, who were already armed, and to his other enemies who were under their power. The king said that it was no longer safe for him to live, and that it would be better for him to hurry to his end and depart from this life together with Elisha. While the king was lamenting in this way, Elisha comforted him. He told the king to bend a bow that had been brought to him. When the king had prepared the bow to shoot, Elisha laid his hands on the king's hands and told him to shoot. The king shot 3 arrows and then stopped. If you had shot more arrows, you would have torn up the kingdom of Syria by the roots. But because you were satisfied with shooting only 3 times, you will fight the Syrians and defeat them only 3 times, so that you may recover the country they cut off from your kingdom during your father's reign. When the king heard this, he left. A little while afterward, the prophet died. Elisha was famous for righteousness and was held in extraordinary favor by God. He performed wonderful and astonishing works through prophecy, and the Hebrews preserved the memory of them with great honor. He also received a magnificent funeral, the kind fitting for someone so beloved by God. It happened at that time that certain robbers threw into Elisha's grave the body of a man they had killed. When the dead man's body came close to Elisha's body, the man came back to life. This is as far as the account has described the actions of Elisha, the prophet, both those he performed while he was alive, and the divine power he had even after his death. After Hazael, king of Syria, died, the kingdom passed to his son Hadad. Joash, king of Israel, made war on Hadad. After defeating him in 3 battles, Joash took back from him all the country, cities, and villages that his father Hazael had taken from the kingdom of Israel. This also happened according to the prophecy of Elisha. When Joash died, he was buried in Samaria, and the government passed to his son Jeroboam.
And we will halt there, with the house of Ahab wiped out root and branch, the boy Joash on the throne of Judah under a good priest's hand, and Jehu reigning in the north, though Josephus notes that even Jehu kept the golden calves. The great purge is done, but it brought no lasting righteousness, and the long decline grinds on. Next time, in Part 3, the close of Book 9, the later kings of both lines, the prophet Jonah and his famous errand, a dizzying parade of short-lived northern usurpers, and at last the Assyrians, the fall of Samaria, and the carrying away of the 10 tribes of Israel, never to return. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly. And before the lamp goes out, a small request. If something tonight taught you, or surprised you, or simply delighted you, do leave a comment and tell me what it was. And if there is a work, an author, or a tale you should like me to take up next, set it down there as well. I read every one, and many an episode has begun its life as a viewer's suggestion. Until next time.